Okay, any other questions?
Hocam Hegel'in şey var ya, self-certainty, perception, understanding. Ona alakalı iki şey soracağım. Bir kere self-certainty var diyor. Bir de laf ediyor self-certainty'ye. Dis diyoruz ama hani biraz belirtmemiz gerekiyor neyi gösterdiğimizi.
No.
Dis desem anlaşılmıyor falan.
You cannot. Yani at the level of self-certainty, you cannot anything more. It is just a this. That's all.
Bir de perception'la mesela bir ağacı algılayabildiğimizi söylüyor.
Yes.
O zaman understanding'den ne farklı olur? Çünkü perception'da bayağı bir şeyle dahil ettiğimizi söylüyor.
Yani at the level of perception, what's at stake is the development of the concepts. Okay? So it is through the unifying power of the concept. The argument almost is the same. Yani, what we need is to put certain, how can I put it? Certain sensations, or in Kantian language it's better, Anschauung, intuitions. Hegel uses this very same term, okay? Intuitions. But problem with the intuitions is that they are not unified. In other words, when I say not unified as such at the level of intuition, for instance, this chair does not come to me if I do not have the structures of understanding and the concepts, etc., a priori categories, etc., okay? This chair does not come to me in this unity, okay? That's the problem with the intuition, okay? The intuitions are partial, always, okay? Always this green, that yellow, that whiteness, that height, that solidity, that weight, etc., okay? And even if I do not have the concepts of height, weight, color, etc., the cloth here, the wood there, etc., the metal here, okay? If I do not have these concepts, I would not be able to make any sense of what I see here. It means, okay? Understanding allows the introduction of the categories, a priori categories. Now in Hegel, a priori to that particular experience, categories always in the process of transformation in connection with their changing content, okay? But we are still talking about categories unifying, okay? Unifying these concepts at larger level of abstractions. No, perception remains at the level of the concept, okay? Therefore, perception does not carry. Understanding requires the capacity to relate concepts with each other in a structure of unity, if you like, okay? On the other hand, concept itself at the level of perception emerges as one single certain entity of thought, okay? Allowing you to unify the incoming intuitions, unify them in the form of the totality. Actually, this will be called concrete totality of an object, okay? So this will present under perception, this will present itself in the form of a concrete totality, okay, of an object. However, this totality does not generate it by the object in understanding, okay, or in the spirit. Rather, this totality is generated through the unifying power of the concept. Concept produces it. Okay. And I have drawn that ugly shape earlier, as far as I remember, when I was talking about Aristotelian conception of logos. You know, these are experiences, okay? Generally called empiria. Again, I'm going to give you Greek names, not because I want you to learn those Greek names, but to allow you how different translations change the picture, okay? To see how different. Empiria. Now we translate, there is a, actually, we are coherent here and translate this almost each and every time as experience. So it seems that the translation experience satisfies us. Okay, fine, all right. You know, the argument was that, again, these different, take them as, okay, experience, whatever they are, okay? He calls them experiences. Now, in the memory, this is the field of memory, okay? Some of them come together, separating themselves from the others, according to certain principles, okay? So, constituting groups. That which summarizes those groups are called catalog. And the experience here, in its relationship with the catalog, is called kat ekasta. Now, how do we translate these terms? There are various different translations. For instance, in physics, they have been translated differently than they have been translated in metaphysics. Okay? For instance, in metaphysics, catalog has been translated as the universal principle. Allowing us, and this kat ekasta translated as particular, allowing us to interpret the situation as a case of abstraction, you know. So there are many particular here, okay? Many particulars are coming together in our memory, in our minds, okay? Constituting one abstraction, okay? An abstraction capable of containing all these particular particulars, okay? Specific group of particulars, if you like. But in physics, they are translated somehow differently, though. Now, I'm going to give them kat eka. Okay, let's start with catalog as well. Catalog has been translated as concrete totality. And kat ekasta has been translated as the constituent component. How do you make sense of these differences? Now, seen from the perspective of this translation, what's at stake is not an abstraction. Okay? What's at stake is rather different. The very constitution of the concrete totality. You know, not abstract totality, concrete totality. What concrete means, by the way? In Turkish, beton, you know. In such discussions, we usually translate it as somut, while we translate abstract as soyut. Okay? What does somut mean, or concrete in the sense of somut mean? That which constituted by parts and through the coming together of the parts hardened, petrified, it means. Okay? So the parts are coming together and petrifies that something here. This is what we call the object here, okay? This is what happens at the level of perception, okay? Now, if you like, we have the hardening power of the petrifying power of the concept, capable of squeezing all these particulars or constituent components together as to produce one hardened object in its totality, okay? However, as you can see, that one hardened object is nothing else than the product and the property of the mind. Okay? That's the problem. So this hardening, this concretization of these particular intuitions means that I am, through the power of the concept, bringing this perception of that wood, the intuition, better said, not perception, into my intuition of that wood, that yellow, that green, that cloth, that metal piece, that whiteness, that brilliance, that height, that weight, etc., together as to form this object. Okay? The concrete totality of this object. So, when you are reading Marx even, you gotta be careful to the usage of the concrete totality, okay? Marx borrows this concept from Hegelian usage, and actually what concrete or the object that emerges, presents itself to perception, in your example, in the form of a tree, is nothing else than that concrete, okay? So perception does this, but what understanding does more than that perception. Here what's at stake is to establish the relations between particular experiences and one single concrete totality. Well, you know, there are many. And now when we engage in the task of establishing relations between these concepts, okay, it means that we are operating at the level of understanding. So understanding requires the ability to relate one concept with other concepts, or if you like, the ability to trace, to follow up the complex, they could be highly complex relations among the concepts. For instance, I may try to trace the connections of this concept with another concept which may be here. Now I cannot simply jump over here, okay? I have to go through the necessary connections that present themselves in the structure of thinking, okay? So understanding involves this task as different from perception. As for sense certainty is the lowest level of what we can call knowledge, if you like, okay? And therefore, all you can say is nothing else than an indication of your awareness of the presence of something, this, okay? Nothing more. Simply because you don't have the concepts to be able to make sense of what you see, for instance. Okay? Therefore, you cannot call this as this is. Is here implying the existence of this. You cannot say this. Let alone you can say this is a chair. Okay? Any other?
What is topography, structural, blah blah, işte castration, anxiety. Ama mesela bu bilgileri şeyle düz edemiyorum. Knowledge olacak. I don't know whether I should really.
You're asking me why Freud has been included in this course, why it is significant for us or something else?
Yes.
Why it is significant for us? I love it. Huh?
I can understand its conscious part, but when I think about knowledge or existence of something, I cannot.
Yeah, Freud is very important here in this process, okay? His contribution is enormous, actually. What is enormous? Unconscious. Unconscious is a very dangerous weapon. Okay? And the insertion of the unconscious into the discussions taking place in social sciences has quite a destructive effect, if you ask me. Okay? For instance, with the introduction of unconscious, you can no longer simply say, as the economists were used to do, that human beings are rational animals. Okay? No. The existence of unconscious tells us that human beings are not rational animals. Actually, human beings, most of the time, it tells us that does not know what they are doing. Okay? So that was why I was saying at the beginning of the course, perhaps not the overwhelming majority of the people may need to concern themselves with the problems of knowledge. But we do need. Okay? Why? Simply because we are at the university, the very institution of knowledge production and transmission. Okay? That's why. It is not a necessity. For instance, I could feel myself much more happy if I would never, ever entangled myself with these problems. Okay? It does not necessarily, therefore, bring happiness or superiority or whatever, okay? But this is our line of work, okay? And here we are, necessarily, as a requirement of our line of work, delve into the questions of knowledge, okay? Otherwise, I would perhaps choose another occupation for myself. For instance, horse breeding, okay? Even that would require certain amount of knowledge, at least about the horses, of course. But that would be a much better knowledge to acquire. Okay, okay. And this is why Freud is so important. It's actually one of the most important moments in history of the crash down of the so-called modern subject. Okay? Today, I don't know, a couple of years ago, or at least 2-3 decades ago, this shows how old I am, okay? 3 decades ago, we were quite happy to crash down that modern subject, okay? And therefore, Freudian contributions showing that, you know, that consciousness being one of the most important aspects of that modern subject, showing us that that consciousness can never present itself ever, as Kant had imagined, in the form of an unproblematic unity. Okay? This means already that actually it has been there in Kant, but had been overlooked for a long period of time. His discussion of the empirical self, you know, the empirical self, he says, already there in 1878 or so. What? Okay? In the second edition of his first critic. Okay? He already says that empirical self is nothing but, that was why it is important. Empirical self is nothing but a flux of manifold of intuitions, and being as such is not intelligible. The empirical self, I'm talking about myself, in other words, okay? So that edifice erected by Kant is the heart of the modern subject, consciousness, okay? When it looks at himself, it is its own doing that it presents itself to its own self in the form of an unproblematic unity, okay? Now, Freudian unconscious breaks down this, okay? Crushes down this, okay? And without displaying any pity, really destroys this viewpoint. Okay? You can no longer say that there is a happy unity and smooth operation of between the categories, their contents, intuitions, concepts, ideas, etc., etc. No, no. The whole edifice crashes down. Okay? And for the first time, perhaps, outside of this organizing look, we come to look at ourselves, okay? And find ourselves as uncompleted beings, okay? That was why that was so much important. Of course, another importance, which is not less than this, is to bring certain problems into the smooth operating world of ontological thinking at the same time. It at the same time destroys the unity of the ontological existence. Okay? It at the same time inserts gaps, shadows into the ontological existence. You know, when you try to think about existence, you'll always find yourselves, this is what Husserl calls one of the aspects of natural attitude, you'll always find yourself thinking about the existence in the form of a unity. Okay? You cannot escape this. This is the power of the concept. Okay? Now, what has been destroyed by this problematic unconscious existence, let me remind you, is problematic. Let me remind you, Freud himself says that psychoanalysis does not know much about unconscious. Okay? We infer, he says, the existence of the unconscious through the symptoms showing themselves in the conscious. Okay? That point is very important. This means that the symptoms show themselves in the language of the conscious, not in the language of the unconscious, actually. Okay? This means that what you see in the form of symptoms are nothing else than phenomena, if you like. Okay? Not the name. You are not dealing with the what causes the real problem actually, but how it appears in the structure of consciousness. Wait, this is another problematic. You cannot even locate the existence of the unconscious. Okay? But you cannot refrain yourself. You cannot take yourself from saying that there gotta be an unconscious. This, you know, without knowing, without being not able to penetrate into it, you find yourself in a position to acknowledge the existence of unconscious on the other hand. This actually creates a real paradox for our unified conceptualization, ontology, and ontological existence. Okay? It destroys it on the other hand. Okay? That's why it was important. These are all in the way to the destruction of the unity of the subject. I don't know how you approach the problem of the subject nowadays, but in those days, you know, you are a different generation. I should confess that you have been grown in a structure of discourse where the critique of subjectivity turned out to be quite popular. Okay? Now, in those days, this subjectivity and its science was quite popular. Okay? The so-called positive sciences, whatever we understand the term, okay? Usually misunderstood, but nevertheless, actually practically meaning empirical. Okay? By the way, positivism does not mean empiricism. Okay? However, the term was this and established in this way, almost used equivalent to the empiricism. So positive sciences do super domination of the thought by the positive sciences. Okay? Actually, in this effort to overthrow the domination by the subject and domination by its sciences, the question of unconscious turned out to be one of the most important cornerstones. I don't know how you look at it nowadays. It turned out to be quite popular to describe everything as constructed, but without knowing, strangely enough, without knowing what constructed really means. And I'm sure that if structuralism does not show you what constructed really means, nothing can show. Okay? Remember, their language was nobody's property. It is society's property. And the relation between the signifier and the signified, even though it was a matter of arbitrary convention, okay, That arbitrary was not in the sense of its being modifiable or unreal. Rather, on the contrary, what should be thought as the most real is nothing else than what is constructed. Why? Take a look at the Aristotelian discussion here. It is nothing else than construction. Okay? Construction under the pressure of the operating forces. Okay?
Orada bir doğal olarak gibi bir şey kullanmıştım. Yani constructor'ın karşısında. O zaman orası da karışıyordu.
Bir daha anlayamadım.
Naturally ya da constructed ya natural bir paternli olmayan gibi bir şey konuşmuştuk.
Yeah, for instance, it is quite popular to talk about the constructed character of ethnicities, identities, the constructed character of gender, the constructed character of, most popular of these two primarily, okay? Imagined communities, for instance, as if it is imagination of a certain class. In that case, in case of Benedict Anderson, actually middle class or middle bourgeoisie, whatever you like to take it, okay? It is as if a matter of imagination by some social group in the society that national identification comes to be one of the major issues in our societies, okay? It is as if it is constructed by their efforts. You know, there are lots of papers on this, nation building, ethnic identity building processes, etc., etc. As if it is through building processes national identities and ethnic identities are formed. Okay? Constructed means, yes, it is not given. Yes, it means it is not natural. It means that it is not natural for somebody to find herself as woman in a given society, okay? Or to find somebody as given, to find himself as Turkish boy or Kurdish boy or whatever, okay? Okay, it means it is not natural. It is generated under the pressure of the forces operating in society and history, though, okay? It is not up to the individual to determine one's gender, it means, at the same time. It is not up to the individual to choose one's religion, to choose what is ethnic group, etc., it means, okay? It is enforced through the dynamic relations of these forces.
Natural olan bir şey var mı ki? Yani constructed olmayan.
Actually, categorically speaking, what we call nature is nothing else than the unity of the phenomenal world. Okay? That's all. Don't forget, unity of the phenomenal world. We are no longer talking about the real world, etc. Okay? Standing outside, etc., etc. There is no outside here in this. In the process of knowing, there is no outside. Everything is in knowing. Okay? Let me put it in this way. So, nature is in knowing, if you like, as we know it. Nature is what it is as we know it. Okay? There is no any other nature than this. That's the problem. Yani, by the term nature, if we are going to understand, as it was in the older modern terminology, that which is given, for instance, in contradistinction to gender, one's biological makeup. Okay? No, you are wrong. Okay? We are no longer understanding nature in this way. Nature, as always, appears to us. Okay? So, in this nature, there is nothing given. Everything in that sense constructed. Any other question?